chambers at the City of Subiaco, open at 5:36 p.m. I welcome councillors, staff, the media and members of the community. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Wonga Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. Please note, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed from the City's website. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Confidential sections of council meetings will not be live streamed or recorded. Recordings will be made available following the meeting. Attendance, apologies and leave of absence. I have an apologies from Mayor Taylor. And I also have a leave of absence from Councillor De Vries. Otherwise, I believe we have a full house. Thank you. Disclosures of... Can we do all this before the question time? Okay. Disclosures of interest. I have a number of disclosures. So let's start going around the table. Councillor Jennings, thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I, Lynette Jennings, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15 December 2020, Agenda Item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct regs. The nature of my interest is the agenda item relates to consideration of the RAR for a development application for 25 Rowland Street, Subiaco. Clopper and Davis are shown as the architects for the development. Councillor Matt Davis is a principal of the firm Clopper and Davis, and he is a fellow councillor. And I understand that the above information were recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register signed by me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield.
Thanks, Presiding Member. I've got three declarations which I'll read out just one after the other. I, Jodie Mansfield, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting on the 15th of December, Agenda Item C5. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality. The nature of the interest is that I lodged a complaint against former Councillor Matheson, which continues to receive ongoing media attention. It may be reasonably inferred that I have an apprehended bias in relation to this matter. Therefore, I will not participate in voting or debate on this item. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes and by the CEO in an appropriate register. My second declaration, I, Jodie Mansfield, declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting on the 15th of December, Agenda Item C7. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality. The nature of the interest is that, along with hundreds of other City of Subiaco residents, I have installed a basketball hoop at the rear of my property. I feel confident that I'm able to make a fair and balanced decision in relation to this matter. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and the CEO in an appropriate register. And then my third declaration, I, Jodie Mansfield, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council on Tuesday, 15th of December, Agenda Item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality. The nature of my interest is that Councillor Davis is a fellow councillor, an architect and director of the firm Clopper Davis, who have designed the mixed-use development under consideration at Item C12. I feel confident that I'm able to make a fair and balanced decision in relation to this matter. I understand the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and the CEO in appropriate register.
Thank you. I have 4 to do, so I'll just rip through them. I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15 December 2020. It's agenda item C1. The type of interest I wish to declare is proximity, pursuant to section 5.60B of the Local Government Act 1995. The nature of my interest is I own a property at 24 Catherine Street, Subiaco. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15 December 2020. Agenda item C5. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is I know and have provided assistance to one of the applicants, Ms Julie Matheson, in relation to her SAT appeal that resulted in the judgment 2020 WASAT 26. I have not provided any assistance to Ms Matheson or ever discussed her heritage grant application with her or any member of the staff of the administration. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15 December 2020, agenda item C8. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is my husband is one of the electors who signed the petition. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. I, Angela Hammersley, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15 December 2020, agenda item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is Councillor Davis is a principal of the owners' architects, Clopper and Davis, who I know as a consequence of sitting on Council. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have 3 declarations of interest to make. I, Derek Nash, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on the 15th of December 2020, agenda item C3. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is my wife was a member of the community working group that informed the preparation of the policies. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. Secondly, I, Derek Nash, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on 15th of December 2020, agenda item C5. Type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is that I was previously on Council with one of the applicants, being Miss Matheson of 139 Coglan Road, Subiaco, and that a reasonable observer might interpret her behaviour during that time and until the present day, and my disdain of that behaviour is possibly leading to an apprehension of bias in my decision making on this matter.
Councillor Felon, will you proceed? Thank you.
I refer to section 5.65 of the Local Government Act, Disclosures of Interest. Councillor Nash used this section of the Act to adversely reflect on former Councillor Matheson. Disclosures of interests requirements are not intended to provide an opportunity for councillors to criticise applicants or former councillors. So I request that Councillor Nash to remove any criticism of former Councillor Matheson in this disclosure of interest, as this is an incorrect use of the section 5.65 of the Act.
Can I seek some governance advice, please, on how to proceed with this? Councillor Nash, I'm giving you the choice to remove the adverse reflection in your disclosure. Do you wish to remove?
I don't believe I made the adverse reflection. If that could be pointed out, what is adverse about? I said I disagreed with her behaviour. That's no adverse reflection on her. It's simply pointing out that I am at variance with her behaviour. So I don't know where the adverse reflection lies.
So Standing Order 4.16, a member is not to reflect adversely on the character or actions of another member. In this case, former Councillor Julie Matheson. Former Councillor Julie Matheson has been vindicated twice by the State Administrative Tribunal for her correct and justified behaviour in respect of the paranoid behaviour of the 2018.
This is not an opportunity to debate this issue or bring up new information. Thank you, Councillor Phelan.
I still don't think I've impugned anyone's behaviour.
I believe that Councillor Nash has expressed his own point of view on this matter, but I would like still governance advice. Thank you. I understand that I apologise for the delay on this. I understand it is a ruling by the presiding member on this matter, and I'm going to accept Councillor Nash's interpretation that he has a right to his own expressing his personal view. Thank you. Can we please move on?
I, Derek Nash, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on the 15th of December 2020, agenda item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct, Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is I know the principals of Clopper and Davis, the architects for the project, and am a fellow council member with Councillor Davis. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phelan.
I, Blake Phelan, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on Tuesday the 15th of December, agenda item C5. The type of interest I wish to declare is proximity pursuant to section 5.60B of the Local Government Act 1995. The nature of my interest is I live at 139 Coghlan Road, Subiaco, which is one of the addresses seeking a heritage grant. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the CEO in an appropriate register. And one more. I, Blake Phelan, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on Tuesday the 15th December, agenda item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Act. The nature of my interest is that I know the principal of Clopper and Davis and he is a fellow councillor. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the CEO in an appropriate register. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Presiding Member. I, Councillor Murray Rowe, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at this meeting to be held on the 15th of December 2020. The C12 is the first item at 25 Roland Street, an impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Act Rules of Conduct, Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is impartiality. The applicant is a councillor at the City of Subiaco. The second item is C5. One of the applicants is a past councillor who we've just been discussing, and I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. Thank you.
Thanks, Presiding Member. I have a couple to get through. First one is C5. I, Councillor Matthew Davis, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on Tuesday the 15th of December, agenda item C5. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is I share a strong relationship with Jim and Kristen Carter at 14 Campbell Street, Subiaco, and I served on Council and have a relationship of enmity with Miss Matheson at 139 Coghlan Road, Subiaco. A fair-minded observer may infer an apprehension of bias with respect to my decision-making on this matter, and therefore I will not participate in debate nor vote on this item. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the CEO in an appropriate register. Number 2, I, Councillor Matthew Davis, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on Tuesday, 15th of December, agenda item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is financial pursuant to section 5.60A of the Local Government Acts 1995. The nature of my interest is that Clopper and Davis Architects, the architectural practice in which I'm a partner, is the architectural consultant for the planning application for the mixed-use development at 20 Roland Street, Subiaco. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the CEO in an appropriate register.
Good evening. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Almost plead poverty. I only have one declaration to make. I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by the Council at its meeting to be held on the 15th of December 2020, agenda item C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is one of the architects for 25 Roland Street is a fellow City of Subiaco councillor, Matt Davis. For the public record, I have no industry, financial or other association with Councillor Davis. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register. Thank you.
I, Councillor David McMullen, wish to declare an interest in item C5. The type of interest is an impartiality interest. The nature of my interest is negligible to non-existent, but I served on council at the same time as Julie Matheson between 2017 and 2019. I, Councillor David McMullen, wish to declare an interest in item C12. The type of interest is an impartiality interest. The nature of my interest is negligible to non-existent, but I currently serve on council with Matt Davis.
Thank you, Councillor McMullen. I also have two declarations. I, Stephanie Stroud, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on this evening, and the agenda item is C12. The type of interest I wish to declare is an impartiality pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is C12 involves the consideration of an RAR for 25 Roland Street, Subiaco. The architects are Clopper and Davis, and Mr Davis is a fellow Subiaco councillor. My second declaration involves C5. I, Stephanie Stroud, wish to declare an interest in the following item to be considered by Council at its meeting to be held on Tuesday, being this evening. The agenda item is C5. The type of interest is impartiality, pursuant to Regulation 11 of the Local Government Rules of Conduct, Regulations 2007. The nature of my interest is I have previously had a professional relationship with Julie Matheson when together we served on Subiaco Council from 2011 to 2019. And Ms Matheson has been nominated to receive a heritage grant in this item, C51C. I understand that the above information will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and recorded by the Chief Executive Officer in an appropriate register, signed Stephanie Stroud, dated the 8th of December 2020. Before I proceed with this, I note the two councillors, maybe there are more, who plan to step out of council and vote on a declaration of impartiality. I'd just like to remind councillors that under the Local Government Act, your duty is to stay in council and vote. Thank you. Proceed with the next item. We do have some approved leave of absence, and it's up on the board, apparently. And you want me to read out each one? Okay. We need a mover and a seconder for Councillor Murray-Rose. Approved leave of absence. Thank you, Councillor Phelan and Councillor Davis. Then can we vote on this, please, Council? Unless anybody like to speak to this? Thank you. Then we'll vote. Thank you. It's carried. Where is it? Where's the final result? 10-0? Is that the final one I read? Thank you. Okay, 10-0. Can we move to the next one, please? Can we have a mover and seconder for Councillor Mansfield's leave? Thank you, Councillor Nash, and thank you, Councillor Jennings. Would you like to speak to this item? No, then can we please go to the vote? Thank you. That's carried 10-0. Thank you. Move to the next leave of absence. Can we have a mover and seconder for Councillor Davis's leave of absence? Councillor Rowe, thank you. Councillor Hammersley, thank you. Would anybody like to speak to this item? Can we move to the vote? That's carried 10-0. Thank you. Can we move to the next leave of absence? This is for Councillor Nash to take a leave of absence. Can we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Rowe, Councillor Mansfield, thank you. Would anybody like to speak to this item? Can we move to the vote? Councillor Rowe, have you voted, please? Thank you. And that is carried 10-0. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, response to previous public questions taken on notice. There are none. We now have a council meeting statement read by the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and good evening, council members and members of the public. The conditions of entry and behaviour to this council meeting are contained in a statement displayed on the door on entry to the council chamber. Please ensure you are familiar with the conditions so that the meeting can be conducted at an appropriate standard.
We now move on to item 5, public question time. The first series of questions I have are from Helen Leader. Would you like to step up to the rostrum? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My questions refer to the annual Electors meeting held on the 5th of December last year and the announcement made 5 days later at the OCM when the presiding member said, quote, "As you know, the annual Electors meeting was held last Thursday. There were a number of questions and motions given on notice to the meeting. Given that we didn't get to all the motions that were submitted prior to the meeting, I would like to recognise these motions tonight. I've heard the motions and have considered how Council can address them. I've chosen to group the motions by topic in addressing them. And under governance and administration, the Mayor went on to identify 5 motions and said, with regard to amendments and alternative motions published on the City's website, measurable goals introduced into the City's strategic community plan, and live streaming of Council meetings on social media platforms, quote, "I have asked the CEO to add these motions to the agenda of the elected members' workshops in the next year," close quote. So my questions: when were the motions identified by the Mayor as #8, 9, 11 and 12 added to the elected members' workshops, and what was the outcome? And for the convenience of elected members, I attached the motions and reasons that I submitted on the 2nd of December last year for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The above motions were not required to be brought to a workshop as Council resolved to consider the motions on an ongoing basis during the year. The live streaming of Council meetings was implemented following project scoping and overall budget approval. The Strategic Community Plan was considered by Council and the full year is scheduled and a full review is scheduled for 2021 and 22. The Council did approve a no rates increase in 2020 as part of the budget process. However, this is not a milestone contained in the Strategic Community Plan.
Mary McFarlane, would you like to approach the rostrum? Thank you.
Thank you. The state government recently announced that a new maternity hospital replacing King Edward Memorial would be built at the QE2 site, with construction likely to commence in 2023. This means that the King Edward site should become available for development in the next few years and is an ideal opportunity for some of the housing density being imposed on Subiaco to be accommodated at that location. This would leave the Subi Oval precinct free to continue as an Class A reserve and provide the open, active green space so desperately needed by our children, Bob Hawke College students and the wider Subiaco community. Question 1. Does the City of Subiaco consider that the King Edward Memorial site would be suitable for accommodating some of the housing density being imposed on Subiaco? And if so, what is the number of dwellings that could potentially be accommodated there based on current R codes, planning regs, etc.? And question 2, what representations are being made or being planned to be made by the City of Subiaco and or Subi Council to the Premier and Minister Safiotti that in light of the availability of the sizeable King Eddie site in the next 5 years or so, the government should immediately cease all plans to sell off the Subiaco Oval precinct to property developers or indeed anyone else? That's it.
Thank you. And through your presiding member, in response to your first question, the King Edward Memorial Hospital site is identified as a key development site in the city's local planning strategy and is suitable for additional dwellings. In the Subiaco Activity Centre, the site is estimated to provide an additional 300 dwellings, with further detailed planning to occur to review this figure. The site was considered in the city's additional dwellings estimate and will be considered separately to the Subiaco East redevelopment area. The Subiaco East redevelopment area and master plan have no relation to the King Edward Memorial Hospital site. In response to your second question, no representation has been made in relation to this matter, as at the September 2020 Ordinary Council meeting, Council resolved to support the draft Subiaco East Master Plan subject to improvements, and officers continue to implement this position. The City is well placed to consider future development at the King Edward site, given its contemporary planning framework, and has not contacted the State Government regarding the future development of the site since the announcement on the 6th of December 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that Mr. Peter McDonald is stepping up for Sharon Williams, who couldn't be here tonight for her questions. Thank you, Peter.
Good evening, councillors. First question. The Ministers issued a joint media statement titled Groundbreaking Agreement Next Step for Subiaco Oval on 31 January 2018. This statement was on the signing of the MOU between the State Government and the City and has delivered little tangible defined benefits for Subiaco. It stated, I quote, "A key focus of the future master planning for the precinct will be the inclusion of as much active recreation space as possible. Could the City please update all on what has been achieved on this key aspect, including what additional green active playing space or fields have been added in addition to the Subiaco Oval to meet the MOU and Council decisions taken on the 20th of June 2017 and 30th of January 2018, which clearly articulated the City and the community's intent for an additional 1.73 hectares of active green playing fields at a minimum." The second question refers to the same joint media statement issued by the Ministers on the 31st of January 2018, where it stated, in addition to what I quoted earlier, "A shared user agreement will be developed to enable access to the Oval for students, junior sport, the general public and the Western Australian Football Commission." It has now been nearly 3 years since this agreement was first flagged. Full transparency on this, please. The general community deserves to know how much access they will have after the needs of the Bob Hawke College and the Western Australian Football Commission are met. Will the City please update all on the status of the shared user agreement, as flagged earlier, including why it's taking so long, and are all three identified users still in negotiation, and are some users going their own ways, developing their own agreements with each other? End of question. Thank you.
Manager of Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. In response to your first question, the City's consideration of the Subiaco East Master Plan, including open space, is detailed in the report to the 22 September 2020 Ordinary Council meeting for item C1. The Master Plan does not make provision for the 1.73 hectares of active playing fields in addition to the Subiaco Oval surface, which the City has been advocating for on an ongoing basis. The community did not have access to Kitchener Park or Subiaco Oval as public open space in the recent past. The Master Plan provides 4.1 hectares of public open space for the Subiaco Oval precinct, which includes 2.1 hectares of active sport space, Subiaco Oval, and 2 hectares of open space which can be used for various activities. In response to your second question, officers are continuing to negotiate with the West Australian Football Commission and the Department of Education and Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage regarding the shared user agreement. City officers have been acting proactively to finalise the agreement as soon as possible. Officers continue to implement Council's resolution regarding the allocation of hours and maintenance costs as set out in the report C1 to the 7th July 2020 Ordinary Council meeting.
Thank you. Paul Clements. Yes, thank you, Paul Clements, and past serving councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor and councillors. I'd like to ask two questions. Given the Subiaco East Master Plan has now been released by the state government, will the city release and provide me with a full, complete copy of the secret minutes of the Special Council meeting of the 30th of January 2018, including any legal advice obtained? If not, why not? The second question, does the city have a policy, or does the city believe they have a role in ensuring staff and student safety on Subiaco Oval? If yes, please explain how this can be achieved and what departments would carry out this responsibility in the City of Subiaco under any delegated authority. Thank you.
Director of Corporate Services.
Through you, Presiding Member. In answer to question 1, the release of the CB East Master Plan does not change the status of any legal advice obtained by the City of Subiaco being privileged. The Council decision in relation to the Special Council meeting 30th of January 2018 has been placed on the public record in the minutes of the meeting. The MOU between the Minister of Lands and the City of Subiaco, which was the subject of the decision, is publicly available on the City's website. In response to question 2, the City is not currently responsible for the management of Subiaco Oval. When the State Government places a management order on Subiaco Oval to the City of Subiaco, the City's public liability insurance policy will be updated to include the Oval, and at that time the City will be responsible for the management and maintenance of the Oval. The Department of Education is responsible for their students and staff.
Thank you. That completes public question time. We now have public statement time. Can I ask Malcolm Mummery, another past serving councillor, to come to the rostrum? Thank you.
Button? I do need a button. Thank you, Presiding Member, councillors and staff. I'm addressing item C8. I address the intent of the petition to have council elect its mayor from within its own ranks. The role of a mayor is almost identical to that of the Speaker in parliaments. They chair the meetings. Importantly, there is no parliament in the English-speaking world that fills the role by direct election. I will return to the logic of the parliamentary reasoning later. If the electors of Subiaco justified why they think they should have a vote electing a mayor, what might they say? Are they best equipped to choose a candidate that knows council meeting rules and would apply them fairly and dispassionately? No. Clearly, other councillors are better placed to judge this based on observing each other in debate. Can electors believe a mayoral candidate that promises anything tangible at all to get elected? No. Individually, councillors have no executive power and need to secure the support of their council to do anything. Can electors choose a leader for council? Clearly, they cannot. Leadership must be earned by securing the trust and respect of followers. So why then is there an option in the Act for a mayor to be directly elected? I've read the Hansard record of debate on the matter, and I found no member who provided a reason other than they knew some electors liked the idea of having a vote. The City of Subiaco needs to be honest in its consultation with the community on this matter. The facts of how council perform the business of governance needs to be objectively laid out, free of any bias or exploitation of emotion. Back to what a parliament seeks from a speaker, that is, their chairperson. They seek fairness, impartiality, and wise judgment, as is expected from any chairperson. The people of Subiaco will be better served by allowing their council to seek that wisdom too, by having their mayor elected from amongst the elected councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement is from Yvette Koo. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to make a comment on Draft Local Planning Policy 1.2, Apartments. I have just one point to make. In my view, where a medium or high density lot interfaces with a low density lot, I think LPP 1.2 should require the developer of the medium or high density lot to fund at least 4 or 5 mature trees at their boundary. That's it. Why? Big, tall, mature evergreen trees acting as a buffer between, say, a 4-storey apartment block and a 1-storey home would not only soften the interface and provide privacy to both properties, it would also add to the tree canopy of the entire suburb. I think everyone should be able to get on board with more trees in our suburbs, especially as a trade-off for significant development. I raised this point during the consultation phase on LPP 1.2. The city's response to this was to state that the draft policies cannot modify provisions relating to boundary setbacks, tree planting, overshadowing, or visual privacy. With respect, this summary statement is incomplete. It doesn't mention that there is a process in clause 1.2.3 of the R Codes, Volume 2, which allows a local government to amend or replace the acceptable outcomes of certain sections of the R Codes with WAPC approval. Relevantly, the sections that can indeed be amended or replaced by a local government by this process include the sections that deal with tree canopy and deep soil areas, visual privacy, private open space and balconies, and landscape design. So, if the city were to support this idea of requiring trees to act as a buffer in between medium or high density and low density lots, it could seek WAPC approval for this change. Then, if the WAPC agreed it was a good idea, required tree planting would sit quite properly in LPP 1.2 without being inconsistent with the R Codes. In fact, with the WAPC's blessing. I think given the number of instances of this serious disparity in zoning that we still have under LPS 5 means that surely this tree planting concept is at least worth exploring. I think it's really important that the city keep pushing like it did during the LPS 5 process to find ways... Have I spoken too long? Okay. Thanks. I think you should have a look at it.
Thank you. Helen Leader, would you like to approach the rostrum? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening again. My statement refers to C8. I signed the mayoral petition because I believe it important that whoever is a candidate should represent not only me, but also the consensus of the councillors, whilst holding their position to high account. Election of the mayor should depend upon his or her record as a city councillor, which is far more important than a mere popular vote. Here's an additional reason subsequent to my signing. An experienced councillor, elected by colleagues to be mayor, should be sufficiently familiar with the Local Government Act to not be interrupted 3 times with valid points of order in a single meeting, as happened in these chambers last month, once for incorrectly paraphrasing the petition. Nowhere does it say the petition calls for residents and ratepayers to lose the right to vote for the mayor, as the mayor can be heard saying when accepting the petition on behalf of the council, and requesting that her interpretation be minuted. Rather, the petition suggests the method used in state and federal parliaments, and, points of order again, twice for making adverse reflections against one or more persons in the community when closing a debate with a prepared speech. And that's without mentioning the unprecedented naming of a resident while implying that a recent grant for his heritage-listed home was made because of his association with Save Subi. The press release on the city's website quotes the possible cost to the ratepayers of following through with the petition, which begs two questions. How much have we already paid for recruitment, retirement, and bonuses following the coincidental resignations of 2 CEOs, and can we ratepayers afford to lose a third? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary McFarlane. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Stroud. Just like to say, remind you that I have a speech impediment, so if I speak a bit slower, please bear with me. My statement addresses item C3 of tonight's agenda. These draft planning policies concern requirements of interfaces and maintenance of neighbourhood character within the requirements of LPS 5. I recall the draft LPS 5 unanimously adopted by Subiaco Council was thrown out by Minister Safiotti, who imposed significant changes to the R codes for random areas of the city. Now I, like some of us here tonight, have no idea about planning. We turn to the experts in planning in the city of Subiaco to advise and guide the council and ratepayers through the planning process to achieve the best planning outcomes for the city. We expect that the wishes of the ratepayers are paramount and that all advice and guidance clearly states the options available to us to achieve our goals. Through attending council meetings, I was under the impression that Minister Safiotti's LPS 5 and associated R codes was not as vigorously opposed or challenged because associated issues such as setbacks, interfaces, discretionary height bonuses, etc., could and would all be resolved or at least controlled with the local planning policies. Of course, now we see in the officer's report that the R codes take precedence in almost every area of planning for the city. These R codes imposed on us by Minister Safiotti define and dictate almost everything that Subiaco ratepayers are desperately concerned about. Streetscape, neighbourhood character, building mass, and most importantly, development bonuses, which are so vague and airy-fairy that a bench and pot plant in front of a building would likely qualify for a substantial height bonus. My concern and my question is, has Council formally stated to the Planning Department what planning outcomes we desire, and then to be provided with a detailed report in plain English on how to achieve this? The report should detail what options and paths are available to us to achieve our goals. Not the goals of Minister Safiotti and the state government, but our goals. The report should not contain any ambiguity or jargon that may mislead or confuse or be open to interpretation. I say this because I'm still greatly concerned that the issue of serious breaches by Development WA of state planning policies for schools was never highlighted in or to Council, as far as I am aware, as a key negotiating bargaining tool, in retaining open, active green space in Subi East. The city of Subiaco should have been in a very safe, strong and comfortable position rather than the cap in hand begging for stance that we now appear to have adopted. Just one paragraph more. I would urge Council to seek a full report from the Planning Department outlining the city's planning goals and a clear pathway with all options to achieve this. I would also urge Council to understand why these serious planning breaches by DWA in relation to schools, which have impacted most adversely on the city, were not highlighted and presented to Council for consideration and possible action to achieve the outcomes we sought. I would suggest that this is done as a matter of urgency. We desperately need responsible and clear advice that is in our best interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Malcolm Mackay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of Sanur Proprietary Limited, the owners of numbers 424 to 468 Hay Street and number 1 Seddon Street, located within the Local Development Plan area, item C1. These sites make up approximately a third of the entire Seddon Street LDP precinct. Therefore, Sanur are a major stakeholder in this project. Generally, Sanur supports the objectives and vision of the draft LDP. However, Sanur strongly objects to the introduction of a new north-south laneway along the entire eastern side of Sanur's land. This provision requires the ceding of approximately 550 square metres of Sanur's land to create an access way that serves very little purpose, is detrimental to Hay Street, and is contradictory to the city's own advice, being, I quote, ensure the street frontages, including Rockaby Road, Hay Street, Seddon Street and Roberts Road, retain continuous facades uninterrupted by vehicle access points. The proposed laneway that runs through to Hay Street would, in fact, break up the facade with the vehicle access point. The proposed laneway has no purpose because the draft LDP provides for alternative vehicle access points to the adjacent lots via Burley Lane, Catherine Street and the proposed east-west spur lane on Dorrick's land. The use of Catherine Street as a vehicle access point for the Dorrick site is also reiterated in the officer's report, where it states, quote, vehicular access can be considered from some secondary frontages, including on Catherine Street and Sagar Lane. When the intent of the LDP is to encourage a pedestrianised environment, it is nonsensical to introduce more vehicle laneways. The proposed laneway is not justified in the draft LDP or the city's report. Traffic consultants Cardno have identified that the proposed laneway 1 is highly likely to cause a rat run and will see drivers travelling at inappropriate speeds within narrow road environments. It does not appear to serve any purpose or function within the road network that isn't already addressed. And 3 is unsafe, being located within the functional area leading to the Hay Street and Rockaby Road intersection, which is in conflict with Austroad's design guidelines and not commonly supported by Main Roads WA. Sanur notes that the majority of the draft LDP initiatives fall on the Sanur land and collectively make the redevelopment of the Sanur land unviable. If the Sanur land is undevelopable, then the draft LDP cannot be implemented. It will have become an academic planning exercise that will have wasted tens of thousands of dollars of ratepayers' money and stopped significant investment in the town centre at a time when it is sorely needed. That's about $200 million worth and 2,300 new wallets in the town centre. To save the embarrassment of advertising an unworkable planning instrument and help secure significant investment in the town centre, Sanur requests that Council amends the officer's recommendation to not commence advertising of the LDP until the LDP is modified to remove the provision for the north-south laneway along the eastern side of Sanur's land. Thank you.
Thank you. Dianella Madja. Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of Sanur, who are the owners of number 1 Seddon Street, which directly abuts Seddon Street and the proposed landscaping works area. This is in relation to item C2. Generally, Sanur has no objection to the upgrade of Seddon Street as a pedestrian-friendly gathering place with comfortable seating, shading, public art and lighting as described in the draft Seddon Street Precinct Local Development Plan. Additionally, Sanur has no objection to the city entering a heads of agreement with Blackburn regarding a financial contribution to the Seddon Street landscaping works as required by Condition 34 of the development approval. However, Sanur strongly objects to the lack of community consultation with respect to the design of this space, given the general community benefit of the project and the unknown impacts on the Sanur land. As a major landowner with the same length of Seddon Street frontage and the same interest as Blackburn, Sanur has been excluded from having a seat at the table to discuss the design of the Seddon Street upgrades. Sanur has never been contacted or consulted by the city with regard to input into the vision or design of the Seddon Street landscape works, which will materially affect any redevelopment of the Sunua-owned land. Sunua's proposed development plans include a significant colonnaded setback to Seddon Street on the ground floor, which effectively creates an extension to the Seddon Street public space by approximately 450 square metres, which increases this space by approximately 1/3. This comes at a cost to Sunua of millions of dollars in lost commercial floor space, which they are willing to give up to the city. The Seddon Street landscape works include the whole of Seddon Street, not just the section adjoining Blackburn Property Group development lots. There appears to be no regard for the access and egress of occupants of the Nova building at 464 Hay Street, who can only enter from Seddon Street currently. At no time has the city engaged with the landowner to be part of the design discussion, knowing that it will have a material impact on their properties. The city has noted on page 17 and 18 of the agenda report that, quote, the Seddon Street LDP, in its draft form, has strong alignment to the intent of the Seddon Street Landscape Works project. The design process for the Seddon Street Landscape Works project will reference the LDP and align to both its intent and future implementation. The minutes of the city's ordinary meeting of council held on 20th of October 2020 record that council resolved not to sign the application form of Sunua's proposed development application until the LDP is finalised. If the city and the council are acting consistently, they should not sign off on any agreement regarding the design and development of Seddon Street, which forms a major part of the LDP, also until this LDP has been finalised. Sunua objects to the city entering into any agreement with Blackburn where it precludes Sunua and the general public from having input to and comment on the design of the Seddon Street landscape project. As such, we respectfully request that Council amend the officer's recommendation to ensure that Sunua and the general community are given the opportunity to comment within a formal community consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Doyle. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Doyle, 251 St George's Terrace, Perth, in relation to item C1. I will just say, in relation to the previous presentation, given that Mr Blackburn's contributing about $1 million to the upgrade of Seddon Street, I'm sure he would welcome Sunua buying a seat at the table for the design discussions, but I'll leave that for a separate discussion. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in relation to the Seddon Street LDP. Thank you to those councillors who took the time to speak with me in relation to this and read my email setting out our suggested modifications. At present, the LDP provides for the Sunua land to have a building footprint of approximately, a tower footprint, sorry, of approximately double the one Subiaco tower of the Blackburn property development, and with a nil setback to 11 stories potentially to Seddon Street for the full height. That has been, I understand, identified by the officers as an anomaly in the LDP and one that should be rectified. We agree. We recommend that a modification to the LDP be made to stipulate a height limit of 6 stories within 30 metres of Seddon Street, and then 11 stories beyond that. We have no objection to the height overall. This would leave the Sunua site with a building tower footprint still greater than the one Subiaco tower, approximately 1,500 square metres available. Now this, in response to questions, doesn't reduce the NLA on the Sunua site. At present, the Subiaco Activity Centre plan provides for building heights of 4, 6 to 8 stories on that site. So even with the modification that we propose, the Sunua land is still getting a substantial uplift from this LDP. It's not being reduced. This would not, the modification we proposed, increasing the setback to Seddon Street, would not increase the overshadowing to Hay Street. It simply increases the setback to Seddon Street. We're not proposing any changes to the southern portion of the LDP where it joins Hay Street. Now, I understand Sunua also have some concerns about the LDP, and it would seem that there are some issues that should be sorted out before this is released for public advertising. There's a few reasons for that. Once it's advertised, it becomes seriously entertained. any decision maker, and that won't be council, that will be the JDAP or the WAPC, will have to have due regard in the interim to that LDP as advertised. As I said, it allows for a 2,500 square metre, 11-storey tower, double the size of the one Subiaco tower, and with a potentially nil setback to Seddon Street. That is a huge building bulk potentially on Seddon Street. Once this is advertised, once the train has left the station, it is very difficult to turn around. We would recommend that you take the time, get this right. It's right in the heart of your town. It is a very important precinct. This could make or break, and Seddon Street is the new heart. We would ask you to take the time, get your consultants to re-look at it, look at the laneway as suggested by Sanua, look at the setback as suggested by us, and then advertise for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The last statement of the evening is from Richard Shade. Thank you.
Good evening. I'll be discussing item C3. Whilst I acknowledge there's been some improvements to the LPP 1.2 from pre-advertising to post-advertising, I would like it to be noted that not all community concerns have been satisfactorily addressed. For example, there is still scope for bonus stories or additional stories as they're stated. This must be removed to provide certainty to the community. Pre-existing low-density dwellings have negligible protection in transitioning areas under the LPP 1.2 compared to the R codes. This must be reassessed. A critical section which read, quote, any portion of a building with a building height difference of 2 stories or more, where applicable, is set back sufficiently to not be substantially visible from any primary outdoor living area of an adjoining lower density lot, and is set back outside the interface area, has been deleted without explanation. This must be reinstated. The minimum setback for developments next to existing low-density 2-storey homes is still shown as 3 metres in some cases. This must be increased to 6 metres. The interface between local centres and residential low-density land still has not been addressed. This must be included in the LPP or an LPS5 scheme amendment prepared to address this interface. Approval of the local planning policies without community buy-in will ultimately result in more community unrest and a series of petitions for amendments to be made to both the LPPs and the LPS5. Hence, it is vitally important to ensure the LPPs are fully comprehensive with the backing of community support. Additional to this, the sign-off of the LPPs are included in a council meeting that is already packed with many other important items, and I fear that there are a number of contrasting priorities. The LPPs might not be given the time they deserve for all the councillors to review and understand the changes that have been made, and more importantly, the changes that have not been made by the city planners. Based on this, I would recommend either the LPPs are deferred to a future council meeting or resubmitted for another round of community consultation. Whilst reviewing report item C3, attachment number 4 for this council meeting, I noted the counter-argument to many of the community's comments on LPP 1.2 was that a larger interface area or transition zone, as per the State Government's Central Sub-Regional Planning Framework Figure 6, would have resulted in more character areas being upzoned. This is completely incorrect. I've got a couple more minutes, Stephanie Stroud, if I'm able to continue. Okay. The City of Subiaco Planning Department created this interface problem when they proposed and supported rezoning of land adjacent abutting to heritage homes, when they could have easily instead proposed and supported land being upzoned to a lesser density. This would have eliminated the step change interface and likely been acceptable to the community. The City of Subiaco Planning Department created this problem, and it now appears that their proposed solution their proposed solution falls short of the mark of rectifying the issue. My key question really is, will the Development Assessment Panel comply with the setback and height restrictions as per LPP 1.2 when making their determinations? If not, then the local planning policies won't be worth the paper they are written on, and the only solution is a series of LPS 5 scheme amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to item 7, petitions and approved deputations. No, we do not have any. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the ordinary council meeting of the 20th of October? Councillor Nash and Councillor Mansfield. Can I put that to the vote? That's carried 10-0. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, announcements by the presiding member without discussion. Being our last council meeting for the year and being close to Christmas, I have a short personal message to you all. It has been an extraordinary year. In February, the Minister approved Subiaco's new Town Planning Scheme 5, and by late October, Development WA released the Subiaco East Master Plan. And so much has happened in between. The elected members' information bulletin of the 12th of March included an article titled, "What is Coronavirus?" And so the roller coaster began. Administration and community facilities such as Lords and the library closed, but the city ensured many services continued. Face-to-face meetings ceased, and soon we were Zooming. Council approved a $4 million relief package, which included free parking, rent relief, and small business grants. When Council returned to the Chamber in August, we offered a news service, live streaming. In May, the city faced another uncertainty called an authorised inquiry. Despite the slings and arrows, we have much to celebrate. This includes our survival with a certain resilience and perhaps a smarter, fresher approach. I wish to acknowledge the work of fellow councillors. I understand the juggle of local government with work and family and all those unseen and unforeseen hours of rigour provided to workshops, committees, external organisations, and of course, full, often too full, council agendas. To Acting CEO Cliff Fruing, and to Director Scott Hawkins, Director Alan Millard, and Director Marion Morton, and to the engine room of senior management and staff, I wish to thank you for your tireless dedication to an exhausting, challenging, but nonetheless productive year. Last and certainly not least, I wish to acknowledge the commitment from our residential and business community. With the many ways you have communicated to us, to your role on DAG and business committees, Subi East Heritage and Planning Reference Groups, as well as volunteer community services. You have reliably stepped up, and in doing so, you have enriched Subiaco. Whether you were applauding us or shaking your heads, your input has been so important. It is the fuel that motivates us and further reinforces the important role of local government in our lives. To everyone, I wish you a joyous and safe Christmas with crossed fingers that 2021 is a little easier on us all. Thank you. We now move on to item 10, officer reports. For the information of the public gallery, it is intended that a number of the recommendations presented to this meeting will be grouped together and passed en bloc, as no amendments or alternative motions have been received from elected members for these recommendations. I'll now ask the meeting whether there are any other agenda items to be withdrawn from the en bloc. Yes, Councillor Hammers. Right, Councillor Rowe, we have C6. Where's my pen gone? C6, Councillor Jennings. C2. Do we have any more? Councillor Powell?
C12.
That's already out, thank you. Okay, then can I please have a mover and a seconder for the en bloc vote? Just to repeat that, the items will be C4, C8. Okay, C8 hasn't been impulled because of an impartiality interest. So let's start again. The items are C4, C9, C10 and C11. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Rowe. Thank you. Can we please put that to the vote? I'm sorry, Councillor Hammersley, I've called the vote. No, C4 is part of the en bloc. Did you want to pull it? I believe it's too late now. Hold on. Sorry, can I just take a moment here? I'm sorry, Councillor Hammersley, why have you called C4? It is included as an en bloc. Oh, okay, okay. Send us into a spin then. So if we can finish the vote, thank you. We have a 10-0, it's carried, thank you. Okay, thank you. We're starting with C1, which is the draft local development plan for the Seddon Street precinct, Preparation for public advertising. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Mansfield. Can I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Jennings, thank you. Councillor Mansfield, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Presiding Member. Just briefly, look, I do take on board the concerns that were raised during the statements just before by Mr. Mackay on behalf of the Sanua Group and Mr. Doyle on behalf of the Blackburn Property Group. In my opinion, those concerns are certainly reasonable and valid, and they certainly can, formulate a robust public submission in relation to the Seddon Street precinct, which will be considered again by the staff and subsequently by council at a following meeting. So I do think it is time to put this precinct out for advertising. It is a very important location for our city, and we do want to make sure that we get the right built form for this area. What I do kind of like about the draft LDP is that it does carefully examine the vehicle and the pedestrian movement throughout this precinct. And it does seem to be wanting to maintain a pedestrian focus on Seddon Street, which is going to be an important area for our city into the future. We know, as we've heard tonight, from landholders in the area who are keen to progress plans, and it is important that the city gives them some certainty about what our preferred vision is for this location. As is detailed in the officer's report, all stakeholders have been consulted and their input has been reflected in this draft version of the document. I think the pre-consultation work that's gone into this draft is one of its strengths, actually, with the visioning and design workshops feeding into the document as it's been drafted. So look, I do think now it is time to send it out to our community. Let's get all those, all that feedback from landholders, from members of our community, from businesses, and see whether our vision aligns with what they're kind of wanting. So I recommend it to you.
Councillor Jennings, you've chosen to move this item. You also have an amendment to this item. Are you suggesting that's a conflict, or can she do both? If you're a second speaker to this item, then you can't move your amendment.
Sorry, Presiding Member, I've got some questions at this stage, so thank you. May I ask them now?
Through you, Presiding Member, I just brought to the attention of the Presiding Member that anyone that moves and seconds a substantive motion can't move an amendment to that motion, and I just flagged that you had submitted an amendment, and I thought that might be an issue.
Thank you for that. My understanding of that was that's amendments from the floor, not formally submitted amendments. Okay. Well, I do want to move that amendment later, so if I can withdraw the second, but I don't know, and if I can't, I just won't speak to the substantive motion. So.
Okay, I understand that Councillor McMullen put up his hand. Are you happy to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor McMullen. We'll proceed. Thank you. Did you have some... Oh, well, I'll let Councillor McMullen first. Would you like to speak to the item?
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Now, you had some questions, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Councillor McMullen, for seconding it and allowing me to withdraw, Presiding Member, my seconding. was raised in the public statements, and I did send a question in on EMC today about at what stage the draft LDP would become a seriously entertained proposal in planning terms, but if there was an answer sent through on EMC, I didn't see it, so apologies for that. But could you please address that point, at what stage it will become a seriously entertained proposal for planning purposes? Thanks.
Manager of Planning Services, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. There are a few tests with seriously entertained planning proposals, and I would just refer to the last two in that, because the other ones really have to focus on an application. But the last two tests are about certainty and imminence. Now, the certainty test is whether the ultimate approval of that planning instrument is certain, and that relates to the planning controls in there. So if the LDP goes out for advertising, it's well understood that there's going to be submissions and some amendments or changes to that may arise. So it's really difficult to say with any certainty that the development controls in there, as proposed and advertised, are going to be the ones that are approved. So I would say that they aren't certain at this stage, and they aren't imminent in that as well. So if something will be seriously entertained if it comes back from a public consultation phase and council makes a decision on the controls that go in there, then those controls are certain, because there's no more decision-making processes, and the imminence is only administrative, as that the changes need to be made to the document and the document circulated in a newspaper for it to be finalised. So until that occurs, after public advertising and after council consideration, that's when you can say that something's seriously entertained.
And I did have another question which arises from stakeholder suggestions in relation to the Sanua site, that the height could be pushed back closer to Hay Street. What effect does that have on the development potential of the area or the owner, Sanua, bearing in mind that I think we've been told constantly that we can't do things like this if it's fettering the maximum, development potential. And it would seem that pushing it back, the height back, to only having 6 stories or something on Seddon Street would affect that development potential. Can you just address that, please? Thanks.
Thank you, and through your Presiding Member, through the stakeholder working group, we understood the development potential that Sanua sought to achieve on the site, and we modelled the LDP to ensure that we're not taking away from any of that development potential, and that's what the maximum height controls are in there for, and they're subject to the 3D diagrams as well. The proposal to push some of that 30 metres away from Seddon Street will affect the development potential of the 1 Seddon Street and Sanua site, and there may be scope to try and increase that height at Hay Street, and that's generally against the principles of our heritage area for Rockaby Road and Hay Street, which is trying to centralise development within that precinct. There's no issue with visual privacy with regard to the separation of the buildings within the site itself. If you do push the buildings and maintain the same development potential as we've proposed, then you would have to overshadow the southern side of Hay Street. There's no question about it. If the development potential is taken away, then you may not have to have any additional overshadowing. What I would say is that if development potential is removed, then it's a bit difficult to argue for the community benefits in the LDP as well to be provided.
Thank you, and thanks for that answer. In the local development plan, it's got bonus or incentive heights near Hay Street after the 2-storey setback of 4 to 11 stories, subject to the shadow. But I just wonder why, you know, if that is the case, I think you explained in your last answer that by pushing the development back towards Hay Street up to, say, 11 stories, that would potentially create a shadow. Why are we allowing that or designating that area for bonus height when it's going to cause a shadow which cannot be, therefore the bonus height cannot be approved or should not be approved? Could you address that? Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. The way that the LDP works is it gives considerations for height on a number of areas, and that has to be read in conjunction with the solar diagrams as well. So just because it says that there might be a potential of up to 11 stories in that area, it doesn't automatically guarantee that. So there might be a design response which doesn't have that, have any additional overshadowing. So you actually have to have a look at the overshadowing and the 3D modelling undertaken as well.
Okay. Do we have any other speakers on this item?
I have a question.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to the planning staff. We've been told that there has been consultation between the stakeholders. Now it appears that two of the major stakeholders have slightly differing views, and both are recommending that perhaps the LDP be deferred until there's some more unanimity in their views. What effect would that have, sort of, as far as advertising the LDP, advertising this proposal? Could that consultation process still take place within the time frame, or do we really need to look at what the major stakeholders are saying and defer it and let there be another stage of consultation process?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. The reason why the city recommended undertaking a detailed precinct plan for this area is that it understood the state of play of the lots and land in this precinct, and its importance to Subiaco and revitalising development south of the Subi train station. This is council's LDP, and what I would say is that the stakeholders have been very well engaged at the onset of the process, which is over and above that of a normal process. And all the views that are expressed today have been expressed through that process and duly considered by the city, its officers, the other members of the workshops, and the professional consultants we've employed. By going out to public consultation, we put it out to the wider community as well, and that provides a greater forum for public feedback. And so we don't take away any rights for anyone to be public, to be involved. It actually invites everyone to have a say on the process, and there's no reason why we can't continue to liaise with the stakeholders in that group and the wider community in proposing changes. So it just gives everyone a say. In the end, it's up to the council to be happy with what's proposed here. Many stakeholders are going to have different views, which some may agree with each other and others may not. So even if we go back now, we may not get to a stage where everyone agrees in any event.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, presiding member. Another question. My understanding of the deemed provisions of the local planning scheme regs is in relation to local development plans, that after there's an initial period of public consultation, which is what tonight's approval, if given, would initiate, and then after that it must come back to council, and at that stage council has to can make the decision. There's not an entitlement for another round of consultation. That's my understanding of the provisions in, I don't know whether it was can't remember the clause number in the deemed provisions, but I did read that. Could you just clarify, please?
Thank you, and through your presiding member. So should council advertise it, then there is an entitlement for everyone to be able to put in a submission, the next process is a council decision. Within that recommendation, there's no reason why the city can work with the stakeholders and elected members in making any modifications as a result of those submissions. So it's mandated to have a consultation period, and that's available for the wider public as well.
Speak up, Councillor Rowe, thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I thought we might be starting to get on to Councillor Jennings' amendment. But anyway, I've just got a question first up, and that is I'd like staff to elaborate on the extent of and likelihood of protection of the heritage aspects to the Hay Street properties with this LPS. Thank you.
You mean with this LDP? But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and through your presiding member, absolutely, the LDP carries through the two-storey interfaces on the Hay Street side as per our heritage area and local planning policy, which relates to it. So there's no conflict in that regard.
So the buildings that have got a different roof structure at the moment that are effectively 2 stories, some of them from memory, they could come down, but just the facades kept. Is that the case? Or?
Through your presiding member, this LDP doesn't approve the demolition of any heritage structure or any buildings like that. It allows for it to be appropriately considered. So there need to be a heritage assessment submitted with any development application that comes through. But what it does is builds in the height limits and planning controls that are in the heritage area.
Yes.
Just to clarify, my understanding is that those Hay Street properties are not heritage listed properties. If that was your particular concern, they may well have character, but no heritage. Is that right? Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Manager.
Thank you, and through presiding member, they may not be heritage listed, but they are definitely within the heritage area and the development provisions which apply in that heritage area.
Councillor Jennings, would you like to present your amendment? And can I please have a seconder for your amendment? Thank you, Councillor Fairland.
Thank you, presiding member. I'm never quite sure, am I testing this or am I actually speaking to it properly? I'm not quite sure what I'm meant to do if I'm testing it.
I have accepted you as a first mover, Councillor Fairland, so you're now speaking to it. Thank you.
Thank you. My amendment is it's proposing to change 4 provisions or some of the text in the local development plan. Basically, there was one is dealing with where there's references to the beating heart, basically deleting that. And there's another provision which is a bit technical about the decision maker being able to, in essence, decide which provisions are and are not applicable, basically in their total discretion, and staff have actually confirmed that they're happy for that to be removed. And another amendment just clarifies that the deep soil areas which are provided in the plan, when they can't be provided at ground level on commercial buildings, they will be 1.5 times, and on other buildings, mixed use and residential in the precinct, they would be in accordance with the R code requirement, which is 2 times the shortfall in the provision at ground level. And then the other aspect of my amendment is to withhold or not to pursue getting the approval or pre-approval of the West Australian Planning Commission to those matters in the plan which vary or amend the various R codes, and also that augment the R codes. And that should be done, in my view, after this consultation period, so that we know what all the amendments that may need to be put to the WA Planning Commission. So it's not signalling to the Planning Commission at this stage what I guess staff's view of the matter is, as opposed to what the public's view is, and that's really what I would prefer, that not be pursued at this stage, efficiency arguments notwithstanding. And there's just one other thing that I apologise I didn't include in the reasons for my amendment in regards to specifically stating what the advertising requirements would be for the local development plan. And I've included in the amendment that there's 4 types of advertising that can be undertaken in relation to local development plans, and the deemed provision says that only one of them need be done and the others are optional. There's 4 of them, so I'm suggesting that all 4 be adopted, and that moreover the plan and any ancillary and supporting documents also be put on the city's website, which is also a discretionary activity, I guess, under the deemed provisions. One of the staff comments was why I haven't mentioned 54 subclause 54A and perhaps number 50 subclause 53, and though I haven't mentioned those or included those because those requirements are mandatory, and that's why I haven't adverted to those in the amendment. And that's it. And I noticed that to preempt, Councillor Rowe's got an amendment coming up as well, and I'm not quite sure how these 2 things can fit together. Personally, I am interested, I guess, in having some more setback on Seddon Street, but I guess we'll deal with that amendment when it comes. And I am mindful that this is going out for public consultation. It's not approving the plan at this stage, and taking account of staff's comments that we can amend in due course if that's the outcomes of the consultation, and we otherwise think that's appropriate at that stage. And as far as those 4 amendments that I've in part 1 of my motion for amendment, I think that we should be putting out the best plan that we can in terms of where we know that we want to change something at this stage, then that's what we should be doing. So thank you.
Councillor Phelan.
I reserve my right.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to? Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Just by way of a question through you to the Manager of Planning Services on this amendment, is it correct that all of these amendments that have been proposed here are capable of being adopted or amended at a later stage if it is the view of the respondents through the public consultation process?
Through Presiding Member, yes, that's correct.
Just to qualify that, I don't think that part 2, you suggested all the amendments in your question, Councillor Davis, but I understand from the amendment it is to remove part 2, so I don't believe that fully fits with your answer, Councillor and Manager of Services.
Thank you. And through Presiding Member, I was referring to the development controls, so not the amendment of proposed to the resolution, to the development controls.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. I mean, I'll have more to say later when I go into my amendment, but just to add to this, I don't find anything offensive in this, and I think I have always said in my time here, I'd rather send something out that's closer to the mark than further from the mark. What's the point? You know, you're at least suggesting to the public, this is what we think within reason. And and quite honestly, I think it's been quite clear to us that this is not going to be built any time soon, so we might as well spend some time getting it right. It's a major development and well above what our Subiaco activity plan has suggested. I don't have a problem with that, but what I do have a problem with, and I'll speak to this now I suppose, is that the distance, the setback in conjunction with these initiatives is something we have to think about very carefully, because we really do want to get this right. The public and ourselves over the years have imagined the activity that could happen in Seddon. So if I could suggest to you that in the reply to my amendment, I've had the staff suggest that the R code say third. Yeah, we can do. Yeah, I just thought I'd put a couple of fires out while I'm at it. All right. Well, hang on. Yeah, but I don't find anything offensive here. I'm almost of the opinion that your alternative is probably the best way to go and leave it until February. But there we go, because advertising something in January is not a good thing. Nothing like this.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Do I have another speaker to this item? Okay, thank you, Councillor Powell.
And this is following on the question about whether it's seriously entertained. Mr Doyle also made the point that both JDAP and the Planning Commission would have to have due regard to the advertised LDP, regardless of whether the council intends to make changes to it later. Now, if it's not seriously entertained, then is that an accurate statement? Would JDAP and the WAPC have to take due regard of an advertised LDP? That's essentially the question.
Thank you, and through presiding member, there would have to be some regard, but the level of weight placed on any planning control is what the consideration is. So whether there would be the full due regard weight as per the planning regulations, that's what the member would what a decision maker would need to consider. So once you put something in there, you also have to consider any development application and its consistency with the development provisions proposed. So if development application comes in and it's wholly inconsistent with what's proposed, you'd have to consider that in its context as well.
Have we finished? Thank you, Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, I'm not supporting the amendment. I have read through it. Look, the wording changes are insignificant to me. I don't really mind if it's being called a beating heart or not. It has come up at workshops. I don't think there was any problem with it then, and I'm sure our community will let us know if they're happy with that terminology or not. So I can't really see the point in making those changes to the document now, and I don't like the second part of the amendment, so I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Thank you, Councillor McMullen.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. My comments are going to apply to both Councillor Jennings and Councillor Rowe's amendments, and that is simply that I'm more than happy to send the draft documents out for advertising at this point. I think the very purpose of advertising is to fine-tune and come up with a finished product, and no one is suggesting that these documents are finalised. I take comfort in the Manager for Planning's comments that they're not seriously entertained documents yet, and that would accord with my own understanding. So I really don't see that we're prejudicing ourselves or the documents in any way by sending them out as they are. On the contrary, if we do so, we'll be showing a little bit of faith in the process that we've followed so far. So whilst we may get amendments of the nature that Councillor Jennings is asking for somewhere down the track, personally I don't think tonight is the time to be doing that. So I won't be supporting this amendment, and I may well make similar comments later on in relation to Councillor Rose.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers to the amendment? Councillor Phelan, would you like to speak? Thank you. Can I please put the amendment to the vote? Thank you. The amendment has been carried 5-4. Thank you. Councillor Rowe, would you like now to present your amendment? I assume you're the first mover. Can I have a second mover for Councillor Rowe's amendment? I'm sorry, Councillor Rowe, I believe that your amendment will lapse. Okay. We are now speaking to the substantive motion. Do I have any movers, any speakers for or against the substantive motion, or will I put it to the vote? Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
Okay, since I didn't get a chance to talk about it earlier, I might as well talk about it now, but as part of the content of what we're talking about here, the information that has been supplied by Blackburns in consideration of what's in front of us seems to fly in the face of, in regard to overshadowing and so on, of what we've been told. Looking at the diagram I've got here in front of me now, it's this seemingly 11-storey building with no overshadowing on the south side of Hay Street. What I wanted to talk to was the fact that this is so important to the community, this Seddon Street precinct, is that I want you to imagine the width between the buildings. Now, we know how the first building came about by government reverse approval, basically. So we didn't have much to do with that. In the end, we could hardly refuse it because the minister had approved it. But I want you to imagine that the R codes state, in reply here from my staff, that these buildings could be as close as 34 metres apart. Now, to give you an idea, I'm not sure what you imagined that was going to happen in Seddon Street, but that's 1.5 cricket pitches. That's about what we've got here. Were you imagining that that's the total distance between these activities? What is being proposed and what is being submitted by Sanua in this site in regard to contribution, I think it's a couple of pedestrian walkways coming through the building from Hay Street. We've had no idea of what else is happening, whereas in the pavilion site we've got a market opening up to the Seddon Street area. But if this opening was all we had to run what we proposed to have, I'm sorry, it's just not going to do it. Now, you've got to remember that the Subiaco Activity Centre plan was talking 4, 6 and 8 stories. This is 11 with plate levels like you wouldn't believe. Now, I don't have a problem with that, but when somebody asks for something that's outside the square, as per what happened with Blackburns, they gave back significant contributions, moving structures that cost $250,000, providing toilets 24/7, 365, storage for market. Mate, I could go on, I was there. What exactly are we lining up here? So I think we should be tidying it up myself. I'm not happy. I would actually take up your position, Chair, and defer this until February meeting and then talk it through some more. I don't believe there's enough potential giving back. I don't care what the rules say about what the minimum setback is. What I do care about is if I'm going to give something away, some extraordinary height, and it's not a mixed-use building, it's a commercial building. It doesn't provide that inner city living that we were looking for all about town. So at the end of the day, I'm probably going to support what is happening here, but I think we should be tidying it up. That's the way I feel. I like to put it out with things that the public can look at and perceive. I'd be looking at a lot more space or width than this, with two incredibly tall buildings going up at this distance apart. It's not enough. That's why I accepted that proposal of 30 metres. If you work it out, it's still not a heck of a lot. It's like 54 metres in the distance between the two. That's more appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Wright, I do believe you're confusing my alternative with the planning policies in terms of a deferment. Do we have anyone else to speak to this item? Then I will ask for a vote, please, on the item. Thank you. And that is the amended substantive motion. The substantive carried motion is 8-1. Thank you. It's been carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to C2, the Seddon Street landscaping works. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Councillor Mansfield, can I have a seconder? Councillor Jennings, thank you. Councillor Mansfield, would you like to speak to this item?
Thanks, Presiding Member. Again, briefly. Look, the plan that's being outlined here has been discussed at a previous council workshop. Basically, it's a two-step process. The first being the adoption of the Heads of Agreement, which is outlined in the officer's report. And this kind of phase of the process obviously covers off on the design elements of the Seddon Street upgrade. And that will be followed by the execution of a deed of agreement once everybody, including council and the community, has had a chance to have a look at it, once we're all happy with the design. It's important to note that entering into a deed of agreement is a condition of the Blackburn Property Group development application, and that is outlined in the officer's report. Importantly, this Heads of Agreement will allow both the City and Blackburn Property Group to agree to the final design, so we'll all have a chance to have a say, and to the full project costing prior to proceeding with any kind of, moving forward with construction or development. I think the project parameters are pretty clear, and I think in the first instance it's actually a really good idea that we're including the exploration of Sagar Lane North in the design phase. There are, I guess, potential community benefits to including that stretch of land. So yeah, let's move forward to the design phase of this important sort of future community site. in the knowledge that what we're agreeing to at the moment is sharing the cost 50-50 in order to undertake this important design work that is needed up front prior to any further development or construction in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Member. A question initially. Just a technical question, I guess. The heads of agreement, this is going to be vetted and or prepared by the city's lawyers. Is that correct?
Through the presiding member, yes, that would be correct.
Also, one of the statements from a Sanua representative was about, no public consultation on this aspect of the planning. And is that correct? I mean, I can't see anything in the report that actually says that there will be any kind of public consultation on the design, but perhaps I'm missing something. Can you clarify that, please?
Yes, through the presiding member, there hasn't been public consultation or precinct consultation with stakeholders because we haven't undertaken the design process yet. But as part of the tender award, we would see that would occur. Obviously, the city and the proponent have a financial interest through the development conditions, so they will have certainly great sway and interest in that, but we would see that particularly the stakeholders in the precinct, there would be a design workshop with them to take on board their feedback and future use of the site, including the LDP into the future, and that would be part of the design consideration.
Thank you. So could you just clarify in the timetable, so where is the timetable, for example, that's indicative timeline, or those tables on page 19 of the agenda, page 20? Just when would that design workshop with stakeholders occur? And so there's going to be no broader public consultation, it's just with the stakeholders. Thank you.
Yes, through the presiding member, we would see that through March, July next year occurring.
And the public consultation aspects as opposed to the stakeholders, through you, presiding member?
Through the presiding member, yes, we would see that in parallel at the same time during that period. I would note there's been, and many of the elected members may recall, some large-scale community engagement that occurred in and around Seddon Street a number of years ago, associated with the formation of the city's place plan, and the city did receive, I understand, almost 3,000 submissions and ideas associated with that, which related to Seddon Street and possibly the future use of that site. So we would take consideration through the tender process with our consultants. We would make them aware and share that information with them as well.
Would anybody else like to speak to this item? And Councillor Jennings, you had some questions first. Do you want to now speak to the item?
Just briefly to say, I think that it seems, the process seems okay, and yes, as long as there is the appropriate, I guess, consultation with stakeholders, if that's going to occur, that's good. And I did have a concern about giving effectively carte blanche to what terms go into the heads of agreement. But I suppose if it's being legally vetted, that, as you'd expect, that gives some comfort. And I also noticed that it is intended to bring the second agreement to council, so that is also of comfort. So we will get to approve that, and I had not appreciated that when I asked the question earlier today. So I think on balance I will be supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to? Thank you, Councillor Powell.
I've got a couple of questions, if I may, please. It regards the concerns that were raised again by before the meeting, and it is in regard to access and egress. I think that Sanua has about the Nova building at 464 Hay Street. Can you address those, please? Thank you.
Yes, through the presiding member, we would see entry into Seddon Street off Rockaby Road, both north and south, and the treatment of that interface as an important aspect of the project, and that could certainly be discussed at stakeholder workshops that we have, and the conduit through Sagar Lane south of Seddon Street would still be open and accessible as well. And I think important consideration of the design is, and this will come before council as part of their workshop and feedback through the process, is designing for the future. And in areas where we are anticipating through other planning processes or other development or other future uses, that we should have flexibility. We need to be cognizant of that through the design and build that into the principles so we can make changes into the future. So it might not be the final word in terms of the precinct. There'll be opportunities for future changes in those interfacing areas.
And will it would appear that Sanua very much wants to be involved in because this precinct area will have quite an effect on it as well. Will it be involved in the process, and will it, will it be allowed to contribute financially?
Through the presiding member, I'll also ask the Manager of Planning Service to have input into this one. But the condition is associated with the development, as a 50% contribution is live and real. So that exists, and it'll be the partners to the project will be the city and Blackburn. And that if there is future development in the precinct and there's an opportunity for contributions, perhaps when this project is finished in some way, shape or form, that add value to the public realm or have community benefit, that can be considered at that juncture. Certainly through design workshops, we would see all the stakeholders and owners on the site of being able to provide feedback into the process. But as we've seen, that doesn't mean that everyone's needs are always met, but certainly I think we need to take into consideration the needs of all users of that precinct. And I'll just clarify that through the Manager of Planning Services through the presiding member.
Thank you, and through your presiding member. So just taking back to the LDP, that's actually got community benefits written in there. And one community benefit for the Seddon Street site is the upgrade of Seddon Street. So should they progress through a development application and also seek to put in a contribution to Seddon Street or other laneways or roads in the area, then that they absolutely can if they'd like to. And that's a requirement for them to go over their normal building heights as well.
Do I have any other speakers to this item? Thank you, Councillor Hammersley.
Presiding member, through you, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions first. When we look at the condition 34, and it speaks about Seddon Street, does that mean Seddon Street, well, it says Seddon Street as it adjoins the subject site, but does that mean all of Seddon Street, so from the north side that does adjoin the site right to the south side of the street?
Through the presiding member, the condition as it is written of the portion of the land of Seddon Street that adjoins the site is not the entirety of Seddon Street. It approximates to about 2/3 of Seddon Street, which is about 1,200 metres squared. but the developer has in principle agreed that the contribution would be to the entirety of Seddon Street, and that entirety means the portion that then extends beyond that 2/3 component that then connects to Rockaby Road, and which approximates to about 2,000 square metres. The officers took the view that this presents a better outcome for the street in totality, and certainly when you're going in to do landscaping works of this nature, probably presents better value for money for council in this instance.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I take it then it does go all the way to the south edge of the street, like, so that it's all the landscaping of the entire road, not just the half that's on their side of the street. And the other thing is, sorry.
Because of live recording, can we please have a live answer to that one? Thank you.
Thank you. And through your presiding member, yes, the intent of the condition would apply to the full width of and depth of Seddon Street.
Yeah, I'll just briefly speak. I'm not going to support this, not because I have any objection to a continuation of the discussions and moving forward, but because I'm just not in the habit of approving agreements that I haven't seen. Now, why am I sensitive about that in this particular instance is because I've seen real live situations where people have entered into heads of agreement not appreciating exactly what they've done and then meeting real difficulties when it comes to the real agreement. So it's really just a governance thing. I can't see what the hurry is. I can't see why the document can't be drafted and Blackburn's input received so that we know that they're happy with it and then be brought to council for review. So really based on those governance issues, I won't be supporting. Thank you.
Do we have any more speakers to this item? Then I'd like to put the item to the vote. Thank you. Councillor Rowe? The item has been carried 8-2. Thank you. Moving on to item C3. Do I have a mover and a seconder for item C3? Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Davis. Thank you. Councillor Mansfield, would you like to speak to this item?
Thanks, presiding member. Local planning policies 1.1 and 1.2. I guess I just kind of want to first of all point out what I think have been very positive aspects of this process. The preparation of these policies was done with input from a 20-member community working group. And then these policies were sort of put out for a very wide public consultation process, which I think is commendable. And that pre-consultation work, I think, has really informed the documents that were put out for advertising. I also think what's positive as a result of this consultation process is the number of important additional changes that have been made to the documents. In particular, with reference to LPP 1.1, we've got some additional diagrams there to aid, understanding and clarity, as has been requested. And in LPP 1.2, the definition of the interface area has been increased from 6 to 12 to 15 metres, and setbacks have also been increased for each storey by 3 metres. And you know, that really is as a result of the you know, the feedback that the community gave us in relation to these policies. What's also been done is that the staff have formulated some information sheets to try and, I guess, aid in the understanding of what is quite complicated terminology, so that lay people can gain a better understanding. And again, I think that that's a benefit. The modifications do address the matters raised in the submissions, and the end result is what I think fair planning policies. I know that not everyone will agree with these policies, and planning is kind of like that. It is quite hard to please everybody when it comes to planning, but what I think is we've got a very fair and balanced set of planning policies which will preserve established neighbourhood character, which I do think manage the interface areas between higher and lower density, so that the bulk of the higher density development is shifted away from the interface with lower density properties, and that these policies are going to guide the future development of our city. I think that it's been a lengthy and comprehensive and at times probably challenging process, but I think that the documents as they're set out present a very balanced approach to development in these locations. So I would recommend them to you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, look, I also take a great deal of comfort out of the rigour in which these policies have been created and the process that's been undertaken. Firstly, the policies were informed by a 20-member working group who participated in 4 workshops. The advertising period was a long 6 weeks, very comprehensive, and dozens of submissions were made. And particularly importantly, with respect to LPP 1.2, design testing was undertaken by our expert design review panel, which ensures a fair outcome for all property owners, be they owners of low, medium or high density properties. Look, with respect to LPP 1.1, and having worked with the single residential framework in the city a number of times, I can see that there are a number of significant improvements. The middle third has been removed, which I think is a step in the right direction. This was, in my opinion, a fairly antiquated part of the policy that didn't necessarily result in great built form outcomes, because it didn't address orientation, and it didn't, as a result of that, respond to environmentally sustainable design principles. So I'm glad to see that be removed. The 15% upper floor area has also been removed from the single residential policy, which I think is another step in the right direction. And I think the staff report clearly outlines that that was largely unworkable. With respect to local planning policy 1.2, this policy I think treads a fine and fair line between protecting the amenity of and the development rights of single residential lower density property owners, but it also protects the amenity and development potential of owners of medium and higher density lots. And I think that's important that we as a city have policies that protect all landowners, be they owners of R20 lots, or be they owners of R60, R80 or R100 lots. Look, I think these policies together will be successful in preserving neighbourhood character. They'll manage the boundaries between higher and lower densities, and they'll achieve the objectives of our LPS 5, which we worked so hard to achieve an excellent result on for a long period of time for our community. So Look, I commend them to you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I just want to just acknowledge my position as presiding member, which I was only asked to today, but I had put an alternative in on this item, and so I just want to call 4.7 and 4.8. I may enter into the debate. Thank you. Who would now like to speak to this item? Thank you, Councillor McMullen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Having had you just foreshadow the alternative that you've got waiting for us, I think now's probably an opportune time for me to convey my position, and that is that I see no harm in delaying the final adoption of these local planning policies until February 2021. That's not to say that there's not good work that's been done to date, and it's not a promise that the final policies are going to be substantially different to what we've got now, but there are some remaining issues being aired by the community, and most of you would have got the same emails that I've got about those. So I think it would be responsible for us to put those doubts to rest if in fact any of you hold the same doubts that I do. There's no impetus on us to push through these policies if we're not completely happy with them. And I think even the people speaking in favour of the policies tonight have acknowledged that they're not perfect policies. Now, whilst they may never get to a perfect stage, if a little bit more time might help us get a bit closer, then I'm prepared to allow it. I do note the officer comment that given the time of year, we might be getting documents back that look quite a bit like what the current drafts look like. That's a risk I'm willing to take, because I think with a bit more time, there might be a little bit of fine-tuning possible. So I won't be supporting the officer recommendation, and I'll be taking that line in the knowledge that Councillor Stroud's alternative will be coming up next.
Thank you, Councillor McMullen. Do we have any more speakers to this item? Councillor Fearling.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll be voting this down in favour of your alternative to defer, simply because of the large number of correspondence I've received from the community that say that their concerns haven't been addressed. So I'll be voting this down.
Thank you. Do I have any more speakers to this item? Then let's put the item to the vote. Thank you. The item has been lost. 7 noes to 3 yeses. Thank you. Now, in normal circumstances, I would prefer not to debate from the chair, so I'm asking the floor if there's anybody who would like to move or second my alternative. Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Do I have a seconder for that alternative? Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Hammersley, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you for putting this up, because we have had people in the community who have been contacting us and asking us to consider the issues further. So I am supporting this alternate and the intent behind it. I can imagine how disappointing it is for those who've worked hard to get to this point if there's no sign-off before Christmas. It would have been nice for all of us, I think, to finish it and all head off to a well-deserved break. LPS 5 ruined a lot of people's Christmas break last year, and the suffering for some has not ended. Issues have been raised and they ought to be addressed in full prior to either acting or rejecting. It's part of caring for the community. It may be that we end up with nothing different. It may be we end up with a few tweaks. It may be that somehow somebody realises that there's something important that has been said. We heard people speak from the gallery. There are issues. I mean, the person who spoke about the trees, who did take the time also to email us all, I did ask for some advice about that issue, and as far as I know, I hadn't received it before the meeting. But these things are too complicated to sort out in a meeting, too difficult, too many bits and pieces. So I just don't think that it's a good forum to try and sort those things out, nor do I think it would have been a good thing for an individual elected member to start drafting these policies, because the documents are important and they're complex. So the other thing is timing. There has been the point made that, the community members should have come to us earlier. Now, it's been just under 4 weeks since this draft was put out. That's not really a long time. Our community members are not professionals. They're not paid to sit and work on these issues. Most of them have jobs and families. It's a busy time of the year, and people have difficulties that crop up in their life. So I don't think we should use that as a reason not to pause and listen. It may give people comfort, and if that's all it does, in my book, that's worthwhile. I, for one, have not been able to analyse everything that's been said and decide on the merits of the claims in the time available. We all have busy lives. Things happen. We do our best to read as much as we can and understand it and come here to make good decisions. Personally, I would have preferred that the pain ended tonight, but here we are. In respect of the fears about developments in the meantime, I'm comforted by the content of Clause 67 of the Dean provisions, and in particular subclauses B and ZB. I'd be surprised if the administration that has advised Council to approve the current drafts would not, in assessing any application that comes in over the summer, apply the provisions and the thinking behind LPP 1.1 or 1.2 and or any current policies that still sit on our books. The seriously entertaining planning instrument concept, which came up from the gallery tonight, is not a black and white concept. It's not easy to grapple with, but I would note that it's a factual question. And in this case, we are quite a long way down the path of this process. Enormous amount of work has been done by the staff, an enormous amount of work has been done by the community, and I think there's some very well formulated parts, and we're really just talking about some of those interface areas where we know we may be in great difficulty in actually getting where people want us to get. Anyway, so I think it's worth taking the time, and so I'll be supporting Councillor Stroud's.
Thank you. Councillor Powell?
I'll reserve. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Who'd like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Rowe. Councillor Rowe, thank you.
Lawrence, thank you. Look, just simply to say I tend to agree with the sentiment. I mean, this is one thing that's a bit hard to tweak later on. You do have to do it right, and something may come out of this next few weeks, probably not. We have to keep in mind, I'm in two minds about deferring it, but, this is more control for the community than all that work that the staff talked about after we did the LPS. that they would do to try and protect the interface that we discussed at length. So I think another few weeks is not going to be a problem, so that's why I was supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a question through you to the Manager of Planning Services, and that was perhaps just to get some commentary around the protection of the deemed provisions and what they may provide us if this is adopted. Thanks.
Thank you, and through your presiding member. From what we understand tonight, elected members and council has some key concerns with the transition areas and the interface areas, and are looking to change provisions. Given that there's a notion to change provisions, it's really difficult to argue that the draft provisions in the local planning policies could be given very much weight in a seriously entertained proposal. What I would say is that there's proposed applications coming through, and one likely to be advertised at the end of this week, actually, for I think about 60 apartments, and that's near lower zoned density. It'd be really difficult to apply these policies in that regard, as that will be a JDAP and RAR report. That's the policies won't be able to be amended in the time frame to the February council meeting, as any amendments would also need to be considered and other changes made and potentially design tested as well. We also feel that all the points brought up at tonight's council meeting are really clearly considered by the policies and have actually been addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Nash.
Look, I'll keep it brief, but I'm just flabbergasted that it's come to this. We had a very, very robust process to get to the point where these policies have been put before us. I don't know what more staff could have done in terms of the process that they followed. We had a community working group of 20 diverse members, so it wasn't just people who were pro-development or people that were just anti-development. It was people across the board that were accepted onto that, from what I understand, onto that community working group. There was 42 days of public consultation, and out of that, only 77 submissions. So, given that there's 12,000 electors and 19,000 people living in Subiaco, that would appear to be a small number, and now we've got a few emails that, from what I've seen anyway, that have come through in the past few days. And the fact that I think we're abrogating our responsibility. We've abrogated our responsibility by not grasping this, respecting the work that staff have done, staff and members of the community. We've had an incredibly robust, as I've said, a robust and thorough system that we've gone through to get to this point. And compromises, looking through it, the compromises have been made from my perspective. So I just find it incredibly disappointing that we're, in my view, lack the courage to make the hard decisions.
Do we have any more speakers to the item? Thank you, Councillor McMullen.
Maybe just to let Councillor Nash know that we'll make the courageous decision in February at this rate, and there's plenty of time for courageous decision making in a couple of months. So I'd support this.
I'd like to add that we show no disrespect to the work that has been done by staff, and in fact I think it even shows more respect to the community and the time and effort they've put into this, into the planning policies. Do I have any more speakers to this item? Then let's put it to the vote. Thank you. Councillor Davis and Councillor Phelan, thank you. The item has been carried 7-3. Thank you. Council, you happy to keep going for C5 or would you like a short break? Sorry? C5, we keep going? Yes? Okay. C5. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Excuse me for a moment. So Councillor Phelan is moving on a proximity interest. Councillor Davis and Councillor Mansfield have chosen to leave the room. Okay. Can we have a mover and a seconder for this item? Councillor Rowe and Councillor Powell, thank you. Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak to this item?
Nothing specific other than this is our normal routine of assessment, and it's part of our policy. It's the thank you that those who want to heritage list their properties. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Councillor Powell?
I'll reserve, thank you.
Do we have anybody speaking against this item? Then, are you happy, Councillor Powell, do you want to speak to the item? Because I will put it to the vote.
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to support the sentiments of Councillor Rowe. Thank you.
Then let's put this to the vote. Thank you. The motion has been carried 6-1. Thank you. We now will take a short 5-minute break. We'll be back, 7-minute break. We'll be back by 8:10. Thank you. moving on to C6, endorsement of the draft waste plan, which is on page 48 of your agendas. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this? Because I believe it was taken down. Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Councillor Hammersley?
Thank you. I've got nothing I'll reserve.
Councillor Jennings? No. Who brought this down? Oh, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, look, just 2 seconds worth, because I was talking to the CEO, or the last 2 CEOs, I think, about one aspect of the town centre, and that's listed in page 49, to improve the public place and town centre collection infrastructure. I really would like that to be addressed, so we're finally getting around to it. I mean, all our Main Street studies and things we've done over the years, and we've done nothing about, trying to do something about rubbish bins. If you look around the public places, you see rubbish bins not necessarily on people's property even, they're out on the laneways and things. So I'd really love to see some thought put into trying to contain those, or centralise them, or screen them, or do something to try and improve what we're looking at. Simple as that. Thank you.
Would staff like to comment on that? No?
Take it on board.
We'll take it on board. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to this item? Thank you. I'm not going to debate this item. I'm just going to make a comment. I did flick a text to Stefan Frodsham, the CEO of WMRC. As you know, I'm on that council. And I said to him, I think we were the first metro to submit waste plan, or first council out of the western suburbs. And he came back and said, yes, indeed. Subiaco set a high standard for others to follow. So I do congratulate the staff for the work that they did do on this plan. Do we have any more speakers to the item? No, then can we please put the item to the vote? Councillor Mansfield, we haven't got a vote. Thank you. That item was carried. Thank you. 10-0. Moving on to item C7 on page 52. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Hammersley. Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you. This has come up a couple of times since I've been on council, the issue of play equipment on verges, and I am very pleased to read the very common sense officer's recommendation in relation to this. More and more cities around Australia and around the world, as I've sort of been doing a bit of research into this, are realising the potential of public verges and laneways and really integrating them into their public realm. They're being used for active recreation, for artistic purposes such as sort of murals and so on, for green projects such as community gardens, and for play, which really is as it should be, in my opinion. If you take a wander up any of the back lanes of the city's main streets, Gloucester Street, Heytesbury Road, Hammersley Road, you'll see hundreds of basketball hoops attached to rear garages and parapet walls being used by hundreds of kids every day. And this is really what I think the city should be encouraging and supporting, not necessarily fining and enforcing through what I think are pretty outdated local laws. I do strongly believe the city should be doing more to activate our public laneways throughout the city by making them more accessible public realms, as I said, for art, play, recreation. I'd love us to become a leader in this area. I do fully support the officer's recommendation into verges. However, I do think the city needs to go a little bit further with the second recommendation, and I'd love to see a permit process initiated immediately with regard to the installation of basketball hoops. As I said, we've already got hundreds of them throughout the city. Kids are playing on them and using them all the time. And in most instances, these basketball hoops aren't really presenting any impediment to the movement of vehicles or pedestrians. I do realise that a revision of the local law is scheduled to take place, I think over the coming months, which I think is fantastic. But I guess in order for us to have some really meaningful change in this area, I'd love us to start thinking a little bit more creatively about this. Things like installing green infrastructure and landscaping, better integrating our laneways into our larger network of public places, and nurturing community and creating safe spaces through the introduction of art throughout our laneways are just some of the things that I'd really love us to really consider and to put out to our community as options. That's work for in the future, but as I said, in the meantime, certainly wholeheartedly support this very common sense recommendation, and I do look forward to seeing some more work being done in the area of transforming our laneways into more meaningful public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. Just briefly, yes, I also support this resolution, or two resolutions, and it's good to see that we've gone through the proper process and that the issues that were raised have been addressed, and that we're moving forward. I also note that there has been in the planning a laneway policy project which has been sitting there, but of course, like all projects, needs funding. I think we've got some funding put aside, and that it's on the list for next year and the following year. So it has always been the intention of the council for some time to look at this issue and also to look at, I think I was told there's something like 214 laneways in Subiaco. So we're talking about a very big project. We're also talking about a very big cost if we start doing things in them. Not that we shouldn't, but of course we've got multiple challenges in public domain, particularly Rockaby Road and Hay Street. So it's all good stuff to look forward to in the future, and I think this is a good start.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Do we have anybody else to speak to this item? No? Okay, well, let's put it to the vote. Thank you. That's unanimously carried. Thank you. 10-0. Moving on to C8, the proposal to change method of the election of the mayor on page 56. This came off en bloc because we did have an impartiality interest on this one. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to C8? Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Can I have a seconder to this item? Thank you, Councillor McMullen. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. Thanks to the officers for reviewing the recommendation and putting up a resolution that effectively commences a statutory process that the local government has no choice but to participate in. So I'm content with the way that it's been put by the staff. Thank you.
Councillor McMullen.
I'll reserve my right.
Do I have a speaker? Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Presiding Member. It's actually a question. The 8 January date that's been stated there is no by which consultation can happen or should happen no earlier than that. If that date was just moves forward a couple of weeks so that we're not getting crossing over so much into the the school holiday period and the post-Christmas holiday period. What impact would that have on the statutory time periods for compliance with all the other requirements about polls and meetings of council, etc.? Would it impact that, or we could move it forward a couple of weeks without that? Thanks.
Through you, presiding member, I'd strongly recommend you don't move it forward. Basically, the timeline gives us effectively from when the submissions, because it's a 6 weeks, minimum 6 weeks consultation period, gives the officers about just 10 days to basically look at the results that come in, write a report to get onto a council agenda. So it's really quite tight if you push it out 2 weeks. So we went for the 8th because it kind of gives us, I think, 3 weeks in what is generally the school holiday period and 3 weeks that's outside of. But the issues are we need to meet the timelines for the Department of Local Government and then the Electoral Commission to enable the poll to happen on, I think the latest it can be is the 28th, I think we said in the report.
Councillor Hammersley.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? The nature of the public consultation that needs to occur, is that simply about, is the question, do you want the council to conduct a poll or not? Or will we be seeking everybody's views about what they think about the two choices that will ultimately come if a poll was to be had?
Through you, presiding member, my understanding is that we have a proposal. That proposal needs to be advertised by local public notice, and what the I think the regulations say is that people are to make submissions.
Thank you. Through you, presiding member. I'm unclear as to why we're being asked to vote on a recommendation when it appears that that it's actually an obligation of the city to follow through a process. So is it not just an administrative process? Why are we being asked to vote on it? If we voted it down, there'd still be an obligation on the city to proceed with it. So I'm just seeking some clarification on that.
Through you, presiding member. So the purpose of this report was to put on the public record so that the community, as in the broader community and council, had an understanding of what this process is. We've never gone through the process before. And we reworded the officer recommendation just so it gave more clarity to our community in terms of when we have had some questions in terms of when the process might be initiated. But you are correct in terms of what the Act and regulations say is once we've received a proposal, effectively we've got a statutory process. We're required to give local public notice and go through that process, but it doesn't provide any indication of when you need to start it. So this outlines the kind of timelines and constraints put on by other entities and gives the community an indication that it's not going to commence prior to the 8th of January.
So for further clarification, from my understanding of this officer recommendation is that the council are asked to receive the report. Now, if they voted it down, it would still go ahead. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, would anybody else like to speak to this item? Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
So I suppose I'll start with a question because both in the officer recommendation and also in the context of the comment further down, it talks about a 6-week period where a decision to proceed or not with the proposal needs to be made after considering the submissions made by the community. And it needs a simple majority vote of council. It doesn't actually stipulate that whatever comes in, we can still make an independent decision I just wanted clarity about that. I mean, I'd like to see that researched because quite honestly, I'll speak to it now, that this is going to cost a lot of money if it goes ahead, and it's good money. And for the life of me, I can't understand why the community would want to divest themselves of involvement in getting involved with their mayor selection. But this is not clear here as to whether, well, two things. One, what are we asking, which was just asked a minute ago. What exactly are we asking? Are we going to do it by just simply waiting for submissions, which seems to be the suggestion, rather than going out and doing a brief survey to see what the general community thinks? Because those who are interested in it, those 270 people, are obviously going to flood this with submissions. What decision are we able to make after the 6 weeks? Are we able to say, well, no, we don't want to do this, or yes, we have to?
Through the presiding member, well, I think as we all know, the city's breaking new ground in this area in any event, because to our knowledge, this has never happened before, not in Western Australia anyway. But the council would be required to take into account the submissions received by members of the community in making its decision whether or not to proceed with the proposal through a poll conducted by the WAEC directly with all of our electors. So it's not a numbers game necessarily. It might well be an argument game about some of the comments we receive back. But the fact that you may receive more for the proposal or against the proposal, you just need to make the decision on the merits of the arguments that you receive. But if you did go to a poll, make the decision to go to a poll, whatever the metrics say on that will be binding.
Do we have any other speakers to this item? Councillor McMillan, I think you reserved your right. Would you like to speak to the item? No. Okay, let's put it to the vote. Thank you. The item has been carried 7-3. Councillors, we now move to item C12, the Responsible Authority Report on page 71. And Councillor Davis will leave the room due to his financial interest. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Councillor Hammersley. Do I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Powell, thank you. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. Yes, this is a complex and large application, which, took a bit of getting around, but having reviewed the plans and in particular the comments from the applicant's consultant, I think they're town planners, I have found myself in agreement with the officer's recommendation. There's lots of things that could be said, but perhaps the one that completely cemented my position was found on, I don't know what page number it was, of the report from Element, which talks about solar and daylight access. And the idea that because 13 out of 18 apartments have acceptable outcomes, that's okay. My mind turned to the people who are living in the other apartments, who don't get the benefit of what our state government, not some weird Subiaco planning idea, but what our state government thinks is an adequate living standard for people who choose to live in apartments. So there were a few others, but that one really resonated. And so I think the design here, which is in a challenging site, but also has some, I think, advantages because of its location. But I do think that there needs to be a bit more design work. So I'll be content for the officer's recommendation to become the local government's RAR, and for that to be delivered to the DAP for its consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, would you like to speak to this item?
No, I'll reserve for the moment, thank you.
Do we have speakers against this item? Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, look, I do acknowledge that it is a tricky site, but it is a very important site. I think in the time that I've been on council, we've had a number of prospective DAs put forward in relation to this site, and none of them have quite got off the ground. So it is heartening to see another one that's come before us that I think is better thought through. And I think that it does respond better to its location than perhaps some of the previous ones that we have reviewed. I like some of the changes that have been made as a result of the feedback from the design review panel. And in particular, I like that there's now increased glazing to the upper floors of the northern side of the apartments, which I think if you look at the renderings are going to offer very good light and possibly good views. I particularly like the retail element, which adjoins Roland Street and sort of interfaces with Forest Place, which I think will add to the sort of sense of a commercial hub in that kind of area. I also like that there's the installation of a parklet at the ground level, which will, I think, enhance the sort of street level and pedestrian sort of experience. I like the public art that's being proposed to be installed at ground level, which also sort of incorporates the car park entrance. I think there's some community benefit there, and it's also in keeping with the large mural that is already in an apartment building in Forest Place. There's also advantages to the separation of pedestrian and vehicle entrances in terms of safety. And I do see the height as being less of an issue in this location, particularly because this site does interface with the car park on its southern boundary and a road on its eastern boundary. And there are little to, I think, no overshadowing issues, and the privacy issues, in my view, have been remedied with the increased screening that's been proposed. So look, I do think that this is a well thought through development, and I would like to see something happen on this site. So that's my take.
Thank you. Councillor Powell. Sorry. Councillor Hemsley.
Could I just ask a question? Have I missed that there's some alternate being put up for this matter? Because I'm just, there's nothing. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just to put that on the public recording. No, there is no alternative. Thank you. Who else would like to speak to this item? Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. So I assume if it was voted down, there would just be no report submitted, just for clarity, is that what happens?
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. If the motion is voted down, then there's no council submission to the Development Assessment Panel, and the officers will still provide their recommendation.
Okay, so it is pretty academic. This would be the third time I would have done that site, been involved in that site. And when I first saw it, I thought, you know, obviously it's not in sync with Dev West, was it? Yeah, Dev West's building next door. And you've got to ask yourself, well then, whose fault is that? I mean, that was the regulations of the day that caused the design of the Dev West property to be pushed back from the street front and to be limited to that height. So do you punish the person who's bookmarking the intersection? So I've come around a bit, and everything that Councillor Mansfield's talked about, I went through every one of those comments from the assessment panel. And they've addressed just about everything that you could address. Ironically, the comments that were made earlier about you know, light penetration and that sort of thing are going to be the case just about in any case, because all of that is in the lower section, not the higher section. The higher section is really nice, and the sun penetration is good. So at the end of the day, I mean, if I was going to look at this one with a clean sheet, it's taken me a while to sort of get over it, but it's in a location that's not offensive to anybody, and the overshadowing was mentioned. And you know, I've got aspirations for Forest Walk to be something different one day, but as a walkway rather than a road, or maybe a bit of a Seddon Street type of situation. So I think it's a great place for people to live, and it is an effort to get a big number of people in town in a great location. So I don't know. I think if I had a clean slate in front of me, I think I'd vote for it. So I'd be actually happy for the DAP to make the decision on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Anybody else like to speak to this item? Councillor Powell?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if I can, please, planning staff. Is this a landmark site?
Through Presiding Member, it's not identified as a landmark site in the local planning strategy.
And to get 8 stories, would it need to be a landmark site?
Thank you, and through Presiding Member, there are a couple of considerations in the report for what needs to occur to have 8 stories. So, you know, being a landmark site and other considerations of high quality design, and I can dig them up in the report if you'd like.
Onto the, it's already been mentioned, the design review panel. I've also read the report. How many ticks did it get from the design review panel against needs improvement?
Thank you, and through the Presiding Member, so you needed further attention for context and character, landscape quality, built form and scale, sustainability, amenity, and aesthetics. I didn't count them, but I'm going to have a guess. It's about 6.
Yeah, thank you. Will there be any more plans going to the design review panel to see whether further improvements can be made?
Through Presiding Member, we provided a request for information for additional and amended plans from the applicant. However, we're assessing them on the ones that they've submitted. So from our understanding, they don't seek to amend the proposal any further at this stage.
It was also mentioned about the Forest Place. The proposed entrance to the building would be from, I think, from Forest Place. Does that cause problems for for a place that's also a public piazza in at times, a public area?
Through you, Presiding Member, in previous applications for the site, Council worked really hard and recommended that the approved developments that were approved previously had their access off Roland Street. That is to protect the ability to close off Forest Street for civic events. So access from Forest Street would obviously impact the ability to close off that Forest Street for civic events.
And one final one. It's in regard to ventilation and solar. How did it fare there as a proposal?
Thank you. And through you, Presiding Member, it was the officers in our assessment. We don't think it meets the relevant element objectives of the R codes with regard to those solar access and ventilation.
Thank you very much. I will speak to it very briefly, if that's all right. Look, this is a very difficult site, and it would be great to see something there, but I think what's got to be there has got to be also good, and it's got to conform with the planning, and this doesn't seem to. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to this item? Then I'll put the item to the vote. Thank you. The item has been carried 6-3. We now move on to item 11, elected members' motions, of which previous notice has been given. I believe there are none. Item 12, new business of an urgent nature approved by the person presiding or by decision of the meeting. Councillor Phelan, I do recall you putting up an urgent business motion. Were you planning to pursue that? No, you're withdrawing it. Thank you. Okay, we come to item 13, to be closed to the public. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Jennings. Can I please have a vote on that? Thank you. That's been carried unanimously. Can we now close the meeting? Does that mean we have to open the doors? We're done? Okay, thank you. I now declare that the meeting is closed at, do I have an exact time here at all? At 8:48, thank you. Thank you for everybody's work. Thank you, staff and elected members.